Hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday CX-ISM, the podcast which looks at everyday customer experiences and the business decisions behind them that may have created them. My name is Katie Stabler. I'm the founder and director of Cultivate, a global and award-winning customer experience agency. And in this podcast, we just bring into the forefront a true, real-life human customer experience and muse on potentially what has gone on in the background and how we can maybe all learn from that. Now, today, you may have noticed I am in a different location. That's because I am in London for the week. Sunny London, might I add. It's rather beautiful. And do I have the foresight to plan these episodes ahead of time? Well, maybe I have the foresight, but I don't have the time. So we are in London, and it's not a bad environment if I do say so. So today, what are we talking about? Well, on paper, this seems like a really straightforward customer experience, but in reality, it was anything but. So as usual, let me tell you the story. It was the day after a rather big night out, and feeling a little lethargic, shall we say, we decided to go to the cinema, Project Hail Mary. Yeah, so it's a pretty recent experience. What a great film, by the way. If you haven't gone to see it, go and see it. So we went to the cinema and feeling a little bit dehydrated, my partner opted for one of those slushies, you know, those frozen fruity drinks. And we got to the counter, went to order the drink, and the lady behind the counter pulls out one of these big, long plastic cups. I mean, I'm talking like the length of my arm. Really thin. I think you might know the type. You often see children walking around with them at theme parks. And that's what she was going to put the slushy drink in. So my partner stopped her and said, "Oh, no, thank you. I just want one of those normal cups." And he pointed to the usual kind of big cup that you would get at the cinema. To which she said, "No, the slushies come in these cups." He was like, "Okay, I appreciate that, but I don't want that cup. Like, you keep that cup, but I don't mind paying the same price. Just give me the regular cup." "No, I'm sorry, sir. We can't do that." Well, I dragged him away at this point because he was starting to get a bit frustrated, and rightly so. And we walked away. We abandoned our entire order. We went next door to a convenience store and picked up some refreshments there. How absolutely bizarre. What was going on in the background for that person to not be allowed to serve the drink in a normal cup, in the cup that the customer wanted, in a cup that the customer was willing to pay more for and actually, you know, maybe come away with less of a product? Hey, I don't know. It was crazy, but very, very frustrating. And not only did it leave us having to go elsewhere, but it meant that I didn't get the refreshing, fruity, ice cold drink that he was hankering after. So the cinema, let's figure out what on earth has gone on here. Now, again, I must remind everybody that I don't work for the cinema, and therefore I cannot say exactly what was taking place. But let's just try and figure it out. First of all, and we've spoken about this a lot already, and we're only in episode 4, policy as the be-all and end-all. So in this case, it certainly seems like the policy was that if you get a slushie, you have to have that cup. No alternatives. And in this case, the lady who was serving us clearly didn't have the empowerment or didn't feel empowered to offer an alternative. She couldn't pivot. It was this or nothing. As a customer, we hit a brick wall. This is also a classic revenue destruction through rigidity moment. Okay, maybe there wasn't an awful lot of grown gentlemen asking for that particular drink and experiencing that particular problem that day, but we cannot have been the only people. I mean, I think it would have saved them money to have given us a standard cup over the crazy big plastic one. But because they weren't able to flex and they had to stick to their policy, they lost revenue from us. They lost our money. We went elsewhere. We spent our money elsewhere. And do you know what? Would I go back to that cinema? Probably not. So actually, they've lost future revenue generation as well. And talk about friction. We had committed to a sale. We were going to be buying those, well, let's face it, overpriced food and drink from the cinema. It was convenient for us. We had committed, and they had put friction at the point of sale. Friction which was so bad that it prevented the sale. Now, in customer experience, friction, customer ease, customer effort is one of the things that we talk about all the time. And to create a good customer experience, to create high satisfaction, the bog standard really is that in most cases, it needs to be friction free. The experience needs to be seamless. It needs to be easy. The customer has to deploy the minimum amount of effort possible to reach their outcome. And this was quite far away from seamless. And maybe there's a bit of learned helplessness here. So again, I talked about this before. We're talking about policy preventing a good customer experience. Actually, could that member of staff just have picked up the normal cup, put the sushi in it, gave it to us, charged the same price? Could they have done that? I think probably they could have. They could have enabled themselves just to create a good customer experience. And for whatever reason, again, whether it's empowerment or whether it's this learned helplessness, they had disabled themselves from taking their own action and just creating a good experience, which seemingly seems to have no negative impact anywhere. And let's just talk about the perfectly placed convenience store next door. It wasn't quite next door, it was a few doors up. But I mean, they must make great revenue, right? Because again, when we go to the cinema, the food and the drink, it is a heightened cost, shall we say. And it's a treat. Yes, absolutely. But I wonder how many people, regardless of a bad or a good experience, actually go to that convenience store and stock up on the goodies before they go into the cinema anyway. I mean, prime location. Well done, convenience store next door. Okay. So I've mused about what might have been going on in the background. And again, might have been going on in the background. But let's talk about psychologically what's going on with the customer here to create that bad experience. So first of all, I think we've got some classic symptoms of reactance theory here. This is where if we feel that our autonomy is being flatlined, is being restricted, is being disabled in any way, particularly arbitrarily so, our reaction to that can become heightened. Now, I may have dulled down my partner's reaction to the ridiculous situation we were in, but he was exceptionally frustrated. I mean, exceptionally frustrated. And it wasn't this poor lady's fault, I don't think, in this situation. She certainly didn't deserve an earful. So before that was about to take place, because I see that's where it was going, we exited the building. But that reaction, that elevated level of frustration for something so seemingly simple, is very, very common. If it just doesn't make sense, again, if it's arbitrary, if the decision-making process seems completely at odds with sensible behavior, then our reaction tends to be heightened. And in this case, the frustration was most certainly there. There's also some proportionality mismatch here, right? So the ask and the rule don't make sense together, especially because there seemed to be no detriment to the ask. We wanted to change the cup. Surely that would have been less of a resource cost for them. No extra action, no change in the fee. We were still happy to pay the same amount for the drink. So the ask and the process around it completely mismatched, which again supports the reactance theory, again feels like the arbitrary nature of that decision-making process was heightened. And it just doesn't make sense. So that uncertainty, again, psychologically, that's related to fear. And because we're triggering that uncertainty, we're triggering that fear, guess what happens? Our little reptilian part of our brain goes into that fight or flight mode. And in this case, might have been fight. Flight for me, I was getting out of there, but fight for my partner. And look, it wouldn't be an episode of CX-ISM if we didn't talk about the peak end rule, right? So yeah, I mean, of course the peak end rule fits in here. What is the standout memory from that cinema experience? Was it the new cinema and the look and feel that I'd never been into before? No, it wasn't. Was it the pretty damn great film? I mean, come on. Ryan Gosling talking to a rock? Brilliant. No, but great film nonetheless, not the standout moment. The standout moment was the ridiculous process of not being able to get the drink we want in the cup that we want. Why? Because it created frustration underneath the surface. It would have created that uncertainty connected to fear. That created this annoyed, angry emotion That emotion is what sticks in our memory, and that memory is what's going to link to the perception and what we know as customer experience of that particular cinema. And okay, we're businesses, right? So what does this mean commercially? Well, I think it makes sense, right? I think you know the answer to this. Of course, they lost that sale. They've lost future sales. Again, there's plenty of cinemas around us. We're probably not going to go back to that one. The store next door benefited. Great commercially for them. Okay, that loss might not seem like a lot, 20, 30-ish pounds, but multiply that over all of the different customers that might not have been impacted by the exact same situation, the whole slushy cup scenario. But if that's the kind of strange approach they take to flexing to customer needs, how many other customers are experiencing similar friction and are choosing not to purchase with them and perhaps not to return? And then on top of all of that, yeah, let's keep on going while we're here. There is a loss of customer advocacy and goodwill for sure, but also I didn't in this instance complain or talk about it online, but others may well do so. So all of that impact eventually has a negative impact on your external view, your reputation, the likelihood of others coming to you in the future. So let's come finally to the business takeaways here. In my sane mind, I cannot believe that there really exists a policy at that cinema where if you want to buy that slushy drink, you have to have that cup. I refuse to believe that somebody wrote that policy and it is in existence and it is being trained out. I cannot believe that. So what I have to believe is that actually it's a people issue. It's a training issue. Somewhere along the line, that way of doing things perhaps has been misinterpreted by this person, and either that misinterpretation has led to that rigidity, or it's generally the way of doing things, but they don't know that they can flex. They don't feel comfortable flexing. And therefore, that person just hasn't been supported and trained to do the right thing for the customer. So again, as often as part of these conversations, one of the key takeaways is training. The other thing is this whole customer at the heart of everything. We hear this all the time and time again, companies saying customers are the most important things to us. But this is a classic example of where, for whatever reason, culture, training, that is not coming to life. So how is this happening? How is this happening? You need to make sure as a business, you have your eyes all over this. And you need to make sure that your people, if you want to really call yourself customer centric, are acting where possible with your customers' interests in mind. So I think this is also a bit of a cultural issue potentially. You know, these conversations are not taking place. This learning is not taking place. I wonder if that interaction will ever even work its way through the business. Will anybody other than that customer service member of staff know about that, or will it go up? I hope it will be reported back in and that odd policy situation will change, but will it? Have they got the culture where that kind of feedback is reviewed and where the processes and policies are optimized for the better good of all? And I think the biggest takeaway here, a bit of an odd one, but this is around, we always talk about personalization, right? And, you know, one of the ways that we can do that is by putting customers into subgroups, looking at the demographics, you know, looking at the personas, etc. In this case, there is a situation where probably the people who buy the slushies the most are children or parents for their children, right? You know, generally speaking, it's a bit of a childish drink. Sorry, partner. But what's to stop a grown adult wanting an ice cold, refreshing slushy drink? And in this situation, they have clearly built out a customer persona where it's a child. And of course, they will maximize the income on this because we'll give you a big, crazy, fun plastic cup. They haven't considered the reality of Mr. Grown Up wanting that same drink, but without the crazy, childish cup. It's a perfect example of putting your customers into subgroups that don't always make sense. So when you're looking at your customer experience, when you're looking at your customer journey, when you're looking at your offering, ask yourself around as many different parameters as possible. Actually, what do your customers want and who are your customers, and design around that entirety. Don't restrict yourself by thinking that just a certain type of customer will want a certain type of thing, because We like to throw in curveballs as Mr. and Mrs. Customers. We like to keep you on your toes. Make sure you have that variety and flexibility. Yes, of course, there will be a fair amount of standardization in what your customers want, but there will always be one who wants something different, and make sure you can pivot and adapt to each and every customer's wants and needs. So there we have it. I don't know quite how I've managed to ramble on about a slushie for this amount of time. But look, this is a podcast about real customer experiences and how those business decisions that are made in op centers, in the boardrooms, on policy, on paper, how they actually impact the customer as a person and therefore your business. These conversations, I think, are so valuable because it brings us back to the real human in the room, human by design in our ever-growing use of technology and AI. If you're not following me already, go ahead and connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram for the more behind the scenes version. And let's keep this conversation going. What do you think about this whole slushy, strange cup situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you'd like to catch up with me over the next couple of months, you can find me at the Zoom Customer Experience Summit on the 6th of May. And also the Global Female Founder Summit. I will be on the main stage talking about how customer experience is at the heart of your entrepreneurial journey if you are a business owner. And that's on the 27th and 28th of May. Again, all links will be in the show notes. Go ahead and register. I'd love to see you there. And as always, folks, happy CXing.